Hello there, subscribers, channel members and people that have got lost on the internet and regret that they find themselves here. In this video we're jumping in to check out Rennsport. I'm going to go pure deep dive into the closed alpha and nitpick like a lunatic. You're going to need a plank of 2x4 to bang yourself on the forehead to get through this video, and probably at least 5 gallons, or I don't know what that is in litres. I was trying to make Americans feel welcome. 10 litres of tea to get through this. But, you know, I've had a lot of people asking me, what do you think of Rennsport at this point in time? Physics, force feedback, sound, you know. So I've crammed it into this video. If you want to find out for yourself, sign up to the Rennsport website, link in the description, and then when the alpha, open alpha, closed gamma, beta, zigfa, whatever, German, Greek, Finnish alphabet version comes out, you'll be invited. You'll be able to drive it for yourself, and you won't need to listen to idiot YouTubers. So subscribe to this, follow, send your email to Rennsport, and yeah, on with the video. Let's go. Right, we're at Hockenheimring in the Audi GT3 car. We're going to pull out on the track, and I'm going to talk about the aspects of this sim. We're going to be somewhat critical, but also keep in mind, I'm going to say a million times, closed alpha, the game simulator is still very heavily in development. It could get better. Hopefully it gets better. It could also get worse. Hopefully it doesn't get worse. But that's game development. It's a complete nightmare. So what I say in this video might not even apply to the future product, but hopefully it gives you an idea of how things are at this point in time. The Gamer Muscle critical lens. So pulling out the pit, and first things first, I think the audio is actually really quite nice in this. You've got a nice bit of transmission whine there. The engine, it has a good bit of depth to it. It sounds quite realistic. Not too overdone. I think a lot of simulators overdo the engine to make it sound a bit over the top. In a real race car, it does depend on the car, but in a real car, if you're wearing a helmet, it does kind of mute the engine a little bit, and it's not as overdone as it is in a lot of games. I think the audio is actually pretty nice. Not obnoxious. Enough detail there for you to be able to tell what RPM you're at. That's the important thing with audio from an engine noise in a racing simulator. For me, it's being able to hear that engine note, so that after a while you learn what engine note equates to what RPM. It really helps you understand if you're cornering quickly, if you're driving fast, you know, gives you a really good reference point. I've not fiddled with the audio settings here, but I can't really hear the tyre sounds. They're there, but it's very quiet. Probably actually more realistic, like realistic volume, but in a driving sim, personally I like to turn the tyre sounds up, scrub sounds and stuff, because that makes up for the lack of being able to feel G-forces. You can use the sound, the audio as a good references to the state of the tyres. So audio so far with this car, I think is pretty good. Better than some current sims on the market, and worse than some others in some ways. Weirdly, I'm actually quite a fan of the audio in iRacing, even though it can sound quite synthetic at times. I quite like it. Because it lines up to RPMs. I do like Race Room at times. I found ACC, it depends on the cars, but it's a little bit overdone often. Like it's too noisy, if that makes sense. And Race Room sometimes can sound a bit too noisy. There's some really good mods for Assetto Corsa actually that have absolutely fantastic audio. But yeah, no, I think this is a great sign. It takes 2 laps to go through the audio. You probably want to go straight into handling there, really. One thing that actually, what's the most important thing of a driving simulator? It's the force feedback, isn't it? Clearly, you know, it's obviously the most important thing. What's actually really noticeable here is that they have massively improved the force feedback from when I last played this at the Goodwood Festival of Speed. They had some demo units out there. The force feedback actually feels much better now than it was there. So in the past, especially at the Rennsport Summit, the force feedback was really disconnected and lacking in detail. Now, definitely feels the force feedback definitely feels a lot more responsive, a lot more immediate. It's still quite smooth in many ways, not in a bad way, but you can feel the slip of the tyres as you go through the corner. So as I turn here, you can feel that point, like, so that's going over the grip of the tyres. As you turn it, you can feel the point at where you've got the grip and that sort of slip curve feel through the steering, which is really useful for actually knowing how much you need to turn as you're going through a corner, or how much steering input is more steering input going to be useful or not. So I guess for you guys, good in terms of describing this relative to other simulators' force feedback. This feels like a mix between race room force feedback, R Factor 2 a little bit, and a tiny bit of ACC. Way more detailed though than ACC, less sharp than R Factor 2, and not as communicative on weight load as race room. But as a sort of ballpark of force feedback, way better, way more detailed than ACC for that tyre load and grip feel, which I think is very important. And more detailed than iRacing, I'd say. Again, for that feel of grip and how much grip you've got. Not as detailed as the original Assetto Corsa. But the thing is, what really affects force feedback, regardless of the force feedback philosophy and how it's implemented with the driving simulator, what really affects it is the underlying physics of a simulator as much as the actual force feedback code or how that's handled. So what I could be feeling is just the actual physics of the simulator as much as its force feedback implementation. But main thing is massive improvements from even the Goodwood version was a slight improvement over the Summit version, and this closed alpha force feedback is a lot better than that version. So we do have some nice track texture coming through the force feedback as well. Curbing you can feel nicely. Let's see, I'm going to lock the brake up here so we get like a sort of vibration for the... Yeah, you can feel, on heavy braking, you can feel a bit of vibration there. So, yeah, and I actually think this... So, if closed alpha, if I was to class this force feedback, I'd already say it's better than ACC's force feedback and better than iRacing's force feedback. Debatable. I wouldn't call it better than R Factor 2's, and I definitely wouldn't call it better than the original Assetto Corsa's force feedback. So, but not a bad place to be in. This is nice force feedback to drive from. I'm using a Fanatec DD Pro with the boost pack on this simulator. This is going to feel even better if you've got a more powerful direct drive wheel. Though the DD Pro actually has really nice detailed force feedback, it's just not that strong. So that's it. That's the most important part of the simulator. Force feedback gets a pass from me. GT3 cars actually are pretty dull cars generally, even in whatever sim. They're quite dull for dynamics relative to like 90s Formula or track day. Do you know what I mean? They've got all these systems and everything. They're quite smooth. So I'm not sure that makes them a good or bad way to test a simulator. Whoa. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the physics here. So this definitely still has the thing where I think the suspension in this simulator is a little bit over the top for big bumps, especially if you hit, as you saw back there, if you hit curbs, situations where I think I'm not a real race driver, but I'd imagine a GT3 car could hit some of these curbs as we've hit them without things going absolutely crazy. Big bumps still really do affect the cars quite badly. I wonder if that's because maybe they haven't simulated chassis flex. Maybe they have, I don't know, or it could just be that, who knows what's going on under the hood. I just know in the past, before I think it was R-Factor 2, when they added chassis flex to their physics, it actually really helped the cars handle larger bumps and made things a lot calmer, because I guess the whole car is acting as a sort of suspension in a sense, like how a go-kart works. So I don't know, with this it still feels like the suspension's a bit slow to settle for larger bumps. On the basic road surface though, it seems great. But yeah, large bumps, a bit crazy. ACC's a bit like that actually. When you drive over curbs in ACC or have large bumps on the track, Oulton Park, even if you run a very soft setup, the cars can sort of almost fire you off the track. It's rather than collecting themselves. iRacing, on the other hand, I find it's one of the top things in iRacing is its suspension. The way you can drive over curbs and stuff, and the lines you can take as a result of that, and the way bumps affect the cars in iRacing for the most part is really, really good. For reference, the fastest real car that I've been in is a Radical SR3, and I've been in it with it driving over curbs, pushed quite hard. So I have a reasonable reference. GT3 car's not a Radical, different vehicles will handle differently, but I think iRacing really does curbs very well. This is a little bit overactive. On that note though, it is worth saying, unfortunately at the moment they don't have a lock to horizon setting in this, so we're kind of locked to the car quite heavily. So hopefully the developers, obviously it's closed alpha, but hopefully they add in a lock to horizon option so that the camera in the car is not so bumpy. Personally, this right now is making me a little bit motion sick. I need the car to be the camera to smooth things out. Again, I don't know why I'm being so complimentary of iRacing. The cameras in iRacing are absolutely fantastic. The way it smooths out bumps and everything, really well done. But even lock to horizon in ACC, not the best, but it functions fine. Lock to horizon settings in Race Room, not the best, but function fine. Same with the original Assetto Corsa. You just need a really good option that makes it so that you're not feeling like you're bouncing all over the place, and allow people to choose. So hopefully that's something that they can work on. That might make things feel less bumpy. But the suspension stuff I was talking about earlier, mostly based on how the car's handling over the bumps rather than visually what's going on. So in terms of the tyres though, and the actual slip, and the controllability of the slip, really feels like there's a nice bit of depth to the handling here. And physics-wise, right, what's the closest in terms of handling? Where do I relate this to? I wouldn't say it handles like... It actually has quite a Race Room feel to it. If you were to mix Race Room and ACC, so ACC's got very peaky tyres, it's very pokey, the cars, and then goes into sort of locked slides quite easily. That you can control it, you won't crash, but you get these sort of little slides and it comes back. There's not much fade in and out. There's not much smoothing in and out of slides, if that makes sense, with the way the car's generally handled in ACC. It's quite abrupt, which may or may not be realistic, but it's just how it is. Whereas this is a lot smoother. It's as if the slip of the tyre is a lot more gradual, a lot less peaky. But the tyres in this are more abrupt and peaky than what I get from what I would say Race Room is like with its GT3 cars. I'd say Yeah, it's sort of somewhat similar between Race Room and an R Factor 2 in terms of this how these tyres on this specific car seem to be purchasing the track from, you know, when you slide and when you don't. Actually, the physics do come across as really quite realistic to me. Like, there are times where I think the front is washing out a little bit, but everything, you know, everything's very predictable. Everything's very controllable. I'm driving very slow, so perhaps you know, not the best test. You tend, when it comes to like absolute physics in a driving simulator, in terms of really being critical of them, I find you only really notice big issues when you're getting to within like a second of what is track pace, because that, you know, that's the crux of if balancing at the limit is useful versus Guitar Hero driving. Some sims suffer from this thing where the fastest way to drive is to not actually really drive. Like, it's really hard to put this into words in a way that someone that doesn't get it would get it. But in AC1 and in Race Room, for example, regardless if you like the physics or don't, there's opportunities there where you can throw a car into a corner a little bit, and you can use that sort of momentum you built up with the slip of the car, with a bit of balance, to get that little bit more performance out of it. You can actually, you can overdrive in a way that's productive to lap time. You wouldn't want to always do that because it'll wear the tyres out. It's not necessarily optimal all the time, and it doesn't necessarily work in every corner and every situation, but it's there as an option. You can overdrive a little bit. Technically it wouldn't be overdriving then, would it? But you know what I mean. You can push quite hard. Let's call it overdriving, and it's still useful in certain situations. That really comes into play if you're actually racing other people. You're off the actual what is the fastest racing line, and you're needing to balance the car and still get good pace out of a corner. I say Race Room and the original Assetto Corsa allow that in what I think is quite a convincing and reasonable way. AMS2, in my opinion, allows that to a degree where it's like you're driving hovercraft cars, and I think it's a bit too far in the slidey is faster way of driving. And then you've got simulators like iRacing, where if you don't adhere to a very specific profile and basically keep it under the limit all the time, you will just lose time straight away. Smooth is always fast, obviously. Well, it's not actually always, but most of the time smooth is fast. You know. But you know what I mean. If you're someone that loves Assetto Corsa and Race Room because of its handling dynamics, and even AMS2, even though I think it's a bit too far in the other direction, too forgiving in many ways, or too slidey. If you like that sort of control at the limit, I think you'll like this. This feels like you've got that control of slip, which is quite satisfying, and that's already in its alpha state. I'm going to move the brake bars a bit further back here, turn the traction control down as well. But I mean, obviously this is just on this track as it is now. We don't know if this is going to have dynamic weather and stuff in it. I think it's planned, but we also don't know the tyres, don't know the car setup. You really can't be too in-depth about the physics until you... The crux of it is, what do the cars handle like with the setups that make them as fast as possible, and do they still drive in a realistic manner then? Or does making the suspension really hard, or you know, some other weird tweak that does that get like insane performance out of the vehicle but makes it drive awful? You know. So anyway, what a what a talk. Physics seem pretty decent. Summarised there. Sure, there could be better, but to me, it's a good sign. I think the innate handling of this is more enjoyable than iRacing, and for me, more enjoyable than ACC's, separate to what's realistic or not, with this car at least. I would say braking on the curb though, back there, when you brake and you've got a wheel on the curb, it's really tugging the car. to one side. Just from breaking on the curb, where I'm not sure why it's doing that so aggressively. That's been in this since the very first version. I like all the track details. Nice little photography flashes in the grandstand's quite nice. It's a little detail, but definitely adds a bit to the immersion. Also, I actually quite like the user interface, and that is worth talking about. They've done quite a nice job. I'm going to keep missing that. Quite a nice job making the UI very minimal and not obtrusive. Quite like the design philosophy they've done with this. With some aspects of the user interface in this game, even in the closed alpha, you can see they've kept things pretty clean. Fairly intuitive to use, the way you bind the pedals and everything, all quite nicely done. Oh, we've got a flat spot. It's coming through the force feedback. That's quite nice. Well, it's not nice, it's a rattling steering wheel, but, you know. Why not simulate that? Why not? But you can see, interestingly, I don't know if they'd like me saying this, they probably wouldn't. They've done in terms of the user interface design, it works nicely with a keyboard and mouse, but it would also work with a gamepad. And I think some sim racers are a bit critical about gamepad players in their driving simulators, but I think driving simulators need to accommodate different forms of input to get people into them. I mean, when I got into sims or realistic racing games the second time, was with a gamepad. Actually, the very first time I played driving sims was with a steering wheel on a PC, but you know, other people's, not mine, because it's too expensive. But then when I got into it myself on my own system, it was with an Xbox controller playing GTR 2, and I was like, actually, this is actually pretty good. And then I was like, I got a second-hand wheel, and then my life was ruined. So you need to. All these games need to support gamepads, and they need to implement that well. It's a really good way of getting new players into simulators, and just you need to get the user numbers up for competitive stuff, and for something that's esport orientated, you want it to be as accessible as possible. So it's nice that the user interface on this seems out of the box to work with the gamepad. Another advantage of that gamepad stuff is if they do VR support in this, and they said that that's what they want to do. If they do VR support, then those types of menus are a lot easier to navigate using like buttons on your steering wheel than some sort of classic PC only type user interfaces. So also you'd expect to want to release something like this on console, really. That's where the bigger audience is, and so you need gamepad support for that as well. I really like the skybox in this. I think if you play Assetto Corsa, recently there's a mod for Assetto Corsa called Pure, which is part of it's the next version of Soul, which for those of you that don't know, basically it's a sort of shader weather add-on for Assetto Corsa. But one of the new things with Pure is you can use photo skyboxes, and it makes a huge difference. Having a realistic photo skybox, and you see the one they've got here. It really does help tie things together, and even though it's probably not, it's not like a volumetric clouds, it's not maybe that dynamic. A photo skybox really makes things look more realistic than sometimes what is technically a more advanced skybox. So the sky looks fantastic on this, especially at this time of day here. You can see that when we went over those curbs, the car flopped around quite a bit. So I definitely think suspension is probably the biggest thing that they probably want to need to be working on. I say that as if that's what you need to be working on, guys. But you know, that stands out as probably the worst aspect of this at the moment. a track penalty there. Shut up. I'm hitting 93 FPS here. This system's got a 2080 Ti, and this is running at 440 by 2560, I think it is, on this ultra wide. So that's pretty good performance relative to how it looks. Not perfect though, but those sort of optimizations and performance things are stuff that definitely tends to come later with games. Right. I just keep driving around here. I don't know if you guys... the way I figure it is that those of you that are interested in this game won't mind me just rattling on about it, you know, going through everything somewhat critically. Those of you that aren't will have already left the video by now. Right, I'm really looking forward to this. You know, actually, when they launch this, the sort of competition and how they do ranking, if they'll have splits and stuff. Personally, I'm a little bit jaded with iRacing. It's certain aspects of it. I don't think the way the cars slide at the limit, it's not to my taste, and the netcode and stuff. It's sort of great. It's grated on me. I just want other stuff to play with online rankings. So I'm really hopeful for Rennsport to add a bit of competition into that space there, and also with this being involved with the people that are behind it. You know, you have another potential big avenue for people that do esports. Now, I'm not a big esports player myself, but for people that are into esports and that have dedicated themselves to driving really quickly and putting a lot of time into it, it's great for them to be able to have a revenue source. So that's another video. I'll have to talk about the pros and cons of esports. But well, I mean, yeah, it's me driving. Let's do a silly lap. We've got 1 minute left in practice here. Let's do a silly lap here. Turn TC off. Let's see what the drifting's like now. Really, whoa, it's the bouncing there. We really need more access to the car setups here. See, the car's really quite stable and happy in slides. Obviously, you're not going to be driving like that normally, but let's say you do a stupid overtake. The flat spots on the wheel now, it's like I'm driving a Dremel. There's a problem with a lot of sims where they... it's like their physics break if you go over the limit, whereas from my... I'm not a real race driver. But from my very limited experience of driving 2 race cars and being a passenger in like 8, like from GT4 to God knows what, supercars and things, cars tend to be reasonably stable. It's just not, if you're not going to be quick. So same with aeroplanes. They tend to be reasonably stable, but flight sims in the past, X-Plane and the new Microsoft Flight Sim have massively improved this, but a lot of these real-time physics engines, regardless of what they're doing, drones, anything, they tend to lack that stability, whereas which is not what reality is like, in my experience. So this is nice. This seems really quite nice and stable. Allows you to, you know, if you've got a little bit of skill of balancing, it's no problem. It's just not quick. It's just not useful. It means you're much more likely to have not be binned out of a race and then ruins your enjoyment of a race you're having. You just get adequately punished, and as I say, that's kind of like how I think real cars are like. Congratulations for surviving the heat death of the universe and getting to the end of this video. So in summary, really good stuff, I think. I'm really quite optimistic, and I'm looking forward to sims like iRacing having more competition. Really like the improvements to the force feedback that they've done each time I've played this, and also really like how it's got that bit of ply at the limit, a bit of playability to the cars, which is crucial, and I think removes that Guitar Hero like input that you have in some other simulators. So really, really good stuff. Let me know in the comments what you would like me to talk about. If I haven't talked about it, you probably don't want me to talk anymore. Unsubscribe, flag the video and run away. But that's it. That's it for this one. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and getting to the end. It was a great journey. Till the next one, happy tea drinking, take care, and goodbye.